Listen, just one more thing.
Hello there. Welcome to my review of episode 1 of season 7 of Colombo, Try and Catch Me. First broadcast on the 21st of November 1977 on NBC. It was written by Gene Thompson and Luther Davis. Thompson was a screenwriter and novelist known for the novels Lupe, Nobody Cared for Kate, and A Cup of Death, amongst others. As well as being a protege of Groucho Marx and writing sketches for him, he also wrote for sitcoms such as The Addams Family, and mystery shows like this episode of Columbo and the second pilot, Ransom for a Dead Man, although he went uncredited on that one. Davis was a screenwriter and playwright whose works includes Black Hand and Kismet for the big screen and Ironside and Beretta for television. The episode was directed by James Frawley. Frawley was an actor and director with various minor acting credits, perhaps best known as the director of episodes of The Monkees and The Muppet Movie. He also later in his career would go on to direct episodes of Smallville and Grey's Anatomy. The episode begins with renowned mystery writer Abigail Mitchell sat at her desk. She is played by Ruth Gordon. Ruth Gordon Jones was born on the 30th of October 1896 in Massachusetts. She began her acting career in small roles in silent films. She also worked on the stage at this time and carved out an impressive acting career throughout the 30s and 40s. She also co-wrote the film Adam's Rib with her second husband Garson Kanin, as well as Pat and Mike, both starring Hepburn and Tracy. She would work continuously throughout the 50s and 60s too, on stage, on film and writing, before gaining one of her most iconic roles as the dotty but sinister neighbour in Rosemary's Baby. This won her the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress at 72 years of age, and she would go on to star in Harold and Maude with Bud Cort, as well as this episode of Columbo, and in 2 Clint Eastwood films, Every Which Way But Loose and Any Which Way You Can. She died on the 28th of August 1985. She was 88. She looks wistfully at a photograph of her niece, tears a sheet of paper from her typewriter, and opens her man-sized safe, checking the safe's door frame before stepping inside. She then retrieves a tape recorder of her notes, starts it playing, then places it in the safe and locks it. She calls in her assistant, Veronica, played by Mariette Hartley. She asks Veronica to call her niece's husband, Edmund, who she refuses to call nephew. She then retrieves the tape, apparently testing whether the safe was soundproof. I mean, she's clearly setting up the safe to serve as part of an elaborate murder. What is it about mystery writers thinking that they can devise the perfect murder? In the next scene, she walks on the beach with Edmund and talks about how much she cared for her niece who had died, and hints at how she knows that Edmund is responsible for her niece's drowning.
I know what you did. Everything you did.
Before throwing him off completely by telling him he will inherit her estate.
So when I die, I intend to make you my principal heir.
It's a clever use of language that tells us more than it tells the character. Sort of stealth exposition. We now know the motive and the means. That evening, Abigail messes with a light switch while timing herself before calling for her maid to collect her bags. Gordon plays this role perfectly, seemingly sweet, good-natured, and a little doddery, while actually being ruthless and sharp as a tack, just as she did in Rosemary's Baby. She goes to see Edmund, who is waiting in her office, and asks him to witness her signing her new will. She opens the safe, and then asks him to get her jewellery box from inside, which he does without incident. She then asks for him to get a money box out of the safe, again without incident. As he returns the box, she approaches the safe, but her lawyer Martin Hammond enters with the will, and a will she has drawn up for Edmund, purely as a precaution. Martin leaves with the signed wills, and once again Abigail fakes us out as she closes the safe without incident. This whole sequence creates enormous tension as we don't know when she's going to do the deed, if at all. She then asks Edmund to leave and sneak back so she can give him the combination to the safe, which apparently Martin the lawyer would object to. I mean, this is a little bit of a stretch to believe that she couldn't just give him the combination on a piece of paper or similar, but it's played out as if she is this eccentric old woman who has her ways of doing things and that Edmund is merely humouring her, so it just about works. As Edmund leaves, Abigail, or Abby, asks Martin to take a look at the light switch she sabotaged as a distraction, while she welcomes back Edmund again, playing on her apparent idiosyncrasies. She goes to let Edmund back in the house and talks him through opening the safe, getting him to write it down. He puts his keys down on a table. She then takes the pencil from him that he's written the combination and asks him to put the wills in the safe. This time she tells him outright that
You murdered my Phyllis. Do you really think I didn't know?
Martin meets her just after this and they go to leave. She picks up Edmund's keys and hides them in her ashtray sand as they leave. It's not a bad setup, if we believe in the nature of Abby's character. It really does hinge entirely on Gordon's performance, and I think she does a remarkably convincing job. While she is away on business for a few days, she gets a call from Veronica as she's on her way home, and upon her return, the police are already there. There are also some fresh cigarette butts in her ashtray sand, but she's greeted by Sergeant Burke, as Colombo is testing out whether the safe is soundproof from inside. He notices Abby and is starstruck, meeting the famous author.
I just want to say, ma'am, that it's a very great honor to meet a famous author. I just wish we were meeting under happier circumstances.
She says it's such a tragedy that he should befall an accident after what happened to her niece, but Colombo says it was no accident, as the safe alarm was on, so someone must have switched it on after he was inside. He then shows her what they found along with the body. A copy of her latest manuscript, The Night I Was Murdered, spread out on the safe floor, which suggests Edmund may be reading to pass the time. Columbo says it was unlikely as the light in the safe didn't work, and they found 6 burned matches, but it's unlikely he would have used these up to read. He also took off his belt, and there are flecks of black paint on the buckle and under his fingernails. Finally, there are 2 pieces of blank, torn paper. None of these items are able to be explained by Columbo, and Abby insists on helping, and he's thrilled as his wife is such a huge fan. He asks why her lawyer didn't come back to their house with her, and she says she felt it was inappropriate. So far she's doing really well, so much so that Columbo has to sort of trick her by complimenting her for thinking like a cop when she writes. This compliment kicks her into action, and she begins to suggest explanations for all the things that are puzzling him. This is like waving a red rag at a bull for Columbo, or, as was pointing out in A Matter of Honour, waving any colour rag at a bull. He now has his prime suspect. She claims she called her maid and told her to put the safe alarm on, which he accepts but will have almost certainly already checked. He's called away by his sergeant and she checks the ashtray sand but is unable to find the keys. Columbo is out checking a footprint which belonged to Edmund and once again talks about one of his favourite subjects, shoes.
Wait a minute, let me see that shoe. Oh, that's a very nice shoe.
Before Abby joins him, he tells her they couldn't locate Edmund's car keys. Then she watches apprehensively as he flicks ash into the ashtray she was just searching in. That night, she creeps down to check the sand and is again interrupted, this time by her maid, who explains that she threw the sand out after finding the keys, which Veronica claimed as her own. It would appear as if Abby's perfect murder is already unravelling. She speaks to Veronica and attempts to discover her motives, but Veronica remains tight-lipped on that particular issue.
Is there anything else?
I can't think of anything. Can you?
This is another fresh idea in a Columbo episode. We've seen people try to blackmail murderers in the past, but not when the murder has been planned to look like an accident. Abby will find it difficult to bump Veronica off and not have suspicion point to her, so she's going to have to be thinking about doing something different. I think it's a great skill to still be able to bring fresh ideas into the formula, the 7th series. The next day, Columbo arrives at a talk Abby is giving about writing murder mystery and listens intently, before Abby calls attention to the lieutenant's presence. She calls him up on stage and stitches him up by suggesting he's an expert in something he very much isn't.
Perhaps Lieutenant Colombo speak to us on his special field, hyper-modern chemical techniques and their application to advance criminology.
Columbo rolls with it before letting us in on a little secret of his own mentality when it comes to the murderers he meets.
Even with some of the murderers that I meet, I even like them too. Sometimes. Like them and even respect them. Not for what they did. Certainly not for that.
Having reviewed 38 episodes so far, I think I can attest to the fact that he is being sincere here and genuinely has liked and respected some of the people he's caught. He's pretended to like far more, of course, but I don't believe this is purely for Abby's benefit, as it doesn't really serve a purpose in catching her, but is another piece of the puzzle for how sincere he is with his praise that he sometimes lavishes on the suspect while he's building his case. After he's finished, he asks Abby if he can search Edmund's apartment, but he doesn't know what he's looking for, so would she mind going with him? He then convinces her to let him drive her Rolls Royce, and on the drive we get a very clever line from Columbo.
My father never owned a car, not till I bought him one. I was 20, I just sold my first book. Shall we compare poverty stories, Lieutenant?
Not in a Rolls Royce, ma'am.
At the apartment, Columbo finds nothing, but drops the bombshell that Abby will not be able to go on her cruise until the case is closed. He also says he did find something, that Edmund and her niece were not very much in love, as she suggested.
You see, Miss Mitchell, there aren't any pictures of Edmund's dead wife. Not a single one.
I'm not sure how true this is, as everyone deals with grief differently, although I'm willing to accept the odds that it's very rare for a spouse to remove all traces of their partner in the event of their untimely death. It then cuts to Abby in her garden with Veronica, She tells Abby Columbo is in the library and suggests he's looking for Edmund's car keys, which she has. She suggests a pay raise and being allowed to join Abby on her cruise, and Abby agrees to her terms. In Abby's study, Columbo sits in darkness, pondering the open safe, engulfed in cigar smoke. It's a very evocative image, and it's unusual to see such a posed shot in a Columbo episode, but I think it looks great. He goes into the safe and tries to work out what happened before Martin, the lawyer, comes in and argues with Columbo about letting Abby go on her cruise. We then cut to a belly dancing class, which Columbo is very much enjoying. Veronica is there exercising. I guess belly dancing was the pole dancing of the 1970s. Columbo discovers she is joining Abby on the cruise and that Abby told her specifically to put something in the safe so she would discover Edmund's body. We then cut to Abby, who is attempting to throw Edmund's keys into the ocean before she's interrupted by Columbo.
Never stops. He loves the ocean.
With Dog, who absolutely steals the show in this scene. He tells her that if he finds the keys, he will find the murderer, and in a stroke of genius on her part, Abby hands him the keys, but says she didn't kill him. She explains she found them in the garden, and in the next scene shows him exactly where. Columbo appears to accept this and goes to leave, when Abby, just one more thing's him, asking if she can go on her cruise. His answer is ambiguous, but we next see her in her suite on board ship. Martin says goodbye to her and hints that he knows what she did.
And call me any time you find a body in your safe.
Veronica is there too, and is a brave woman to go on the open water with someone she's blackmailing. It may have been easier for Abby to have set up the second accident than I thought. Of course, the ship hasn't sailed yet, and so Columbo arrives with a warrant for Abby. He has a photo of the area Abby says she found the keys from the day the body was discovered, and there are no keys there. She says she must have made a mistake about which bush she found them under, but he insists she returns home with him. Here he's ready to explain everything that happened. He lays out the pieces of paper he found and explains that his theory is that Edmund would have tried to identify his murderer to the police, but as he couldn't be sure who would find the body, he had to hide that information. He reveals that Edmund scratched an arrow onto the money boxes that points it up to the light fitting when stacked in the right order. Abby attempts to throw him off, acting more eccentric than usual, but it's no use. This scene does go on for a little too long and is a little slow, especially contrasted with how well the tension was built leading up to the actual murder. Columbo eventually puts it together and unscrews the broken light bulb, revealing the title page of the manuscript, The Night I Was Murdered by Abigail Mitchell, but with two words blanked out by the matches so that it reads,
I was murdered by Abigail Mitchell.
Columbo lets her know he understands why she did it, and she asks if he might consider letting her off, but he says he can't. And the episode ends with her mournfully suggesting that if he had investigated her niece's death, this never would have happened. This is a very strong episode. A great murderer with a great plot and a great motive. The humour is perfectly pitched and interwoven into the plot. There's pathos and some really good cinematography. With the exception of how slow-paced the reveal is, I can't really find much fault with it. Maybe they could have made it clearer that Edmund had killed his wife, but I think it works better leaving it at least potentially ambiguous. The subplot with Veronica and her blackmail scheme is a bit more filler than absolutely necessary, and it isn't really resolved in any particular fashion, but I don't think it affects the overall enjoyment of the episode. It's just an enjoyable watch all around, and it's got to be a 5 out of 5 for me. Thank you. Goodbye.